Sorry about that, babe.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Bits and Glory podcast, or Bitscast, I guess. This is episode number 2. It's been a long time since we did one. First one we did was Final Fantasy, and I want to say it was actually probably close to a year ago. I think the night that I recorded it actually was the night that I got my cat Belmont. Yeah, that was a that was a while ago. I don't know how I'm going to continue the format here. At some point I would like to kind of bring guests on. Mostly, you know, the people that are frequenting my Discord, but obviously if there's any YouTube friends of mine, I only have a couple, that want to do any kind of collaborations or whatever, I'm all for it. And I don't think I'm necessarily going to abandon the format that I had entirely, where I go, like with Final Fantasy, I kind of went step by step through the game. I'm not going to be doing that today for Shining in the Darkness, which, as you can see, is episode 2. But I want to do like a variety of things. I'm thinking, I already have an idea for podcast 3. I don't want to spoil it yet, but it's going to be different. It's not going to be focused on a game. And yeah, I hope to be a little bit more consistent for you guys. It's a little tough, you know, obviously, I'm sure you know, I don't have all the time in the world to do this. This isn't my job. This is a passion project. I don't even get paid for any of this yet. Gotta get to 1,000 subs. Come on, guys, let's get there. It's I feel like I'm well overdue for that. But, you know, for those of you that do follow my channel, you know, primarily, my favorite things that I enjoy doing is my video game reviews. That's my favorite thing. And I hope that, as far as the quality goes, that is what you guys enjoy the most. The Let's Plays are kind of like a byproduct of it, mostly because, I mean, shoot, what's the easiest way to get footage for a game? To play it, right? So if I just play through the entire game, then I got all my footage that I need for the review. That's realistically why I started the Let's Plays. I'm not necessarily a huge Let's Play guy, but I feel like if it's like a first playthrough, or if it's some kind of like challenge run, or if somebody's playing the game and they know quite a bit about it, or some tips and tricks, then it's worthwhile. And I feel like I could at least hit one of those 3 things for you guys when I do those Let's Plays. And then obviously my thoughts with the review. I like doing the unboxings and stuff, but it seems like those don't get that much traction, but I feel like I have a pretty good gaming collection, especially retro gaming. So I want to show that off to you guys. Especially the old RPGs are so cool with all the stuff that they're packed in with, you know what I mean? You know, I feel like the podcast could be a very good kind of supplemental thing. Shoot, I mean, honestly, a lot of people seem to enjoy the first one, so if people enjoy the second one, I'll gladly do them a little bit more, you know what I mean? I could kind of focus some extra attention from other things, other passion projects that I'm thinking about doing, and then focus it more to this. But yeah, I want to be a little bit more consistent with the podcast for you guys. And I would at some point like to have some guests on, but I'm going to ride solo for a little while until I get concrete feedback and will and desire that somebody else could match me with it. I don't want to just, you know, they go, oh, I'll have you on, and then, you know, that somebody flakes or whatever the case may be, so. Anyways, I touched on it briefly. I'm sure you guys could see. This particular podcast is going to be about Shining in the Darkness, originally released on the Sega Genesis. I guess we'll go over all the goods here. By the way, by the time you see this video, this podcast, listen to it, whatever you want to do, my entire Let's Play will be uploaded on my channel, and a review that I did years ago is already on my channel as well. I'll link both of those in the description and pinned comment below, so if you want to kind of get the whole Shining in the Darkness experience. I won't be doing a unboxing. I'll kind of show you guys what I got here. There's really not much to it, and you'll see part of the reason why I don't want to do an unboxing for it in a little bit. But anyways, guys, Shining in the Darkness was developed by Climax Entertainment, Sonic Software Planning, you know, the same old, the crew, if you will, published by Sega. This is the first game in the Shining series. So, I don't think any of them are picking up. Yeah, I got Shining Force posters. They're out of the frame, though. For those of you that know me and have followed the channel, Shining Force, in general, is one of my favorite franchises. Shining Force, in particular, the first one, probably in my top 5 games of all time. This is what got it started. So, realistically, you know, I love those games to death, but I owe it all to this. Without this, those games probably don't exist. You know what I mean? So Shining in the Darkness was originally released on March 29th, 1991 in Japan, released on August 6th, 1991 North America, and in PAL territory on September 9th of 1991 as well. So it was released in 1991 across the board, which is pretty cool. And for those of you that don't know, this is a first-person RPG dungeon crawler. Japanese RPG, obviously, JRPG. And I will let you know right now that Shining in the Darkness was my first foray into the dungeon crawler genre. Also, my cat's running around upstairs, so if you hear pitter-pattering, that's what it is. Yeah, so I kind of want to go over the plot a little bit, but like I said, I'm not going to go super granular into the game bit by bit by bit by bit. So the rough overview, I guess, is you control the main character, who I believe the default name for it is Hiro, H-I-R-O, but you could actually name it whatever you want, so I usually name it Razor or something like that, you know, my boy. And throughout the game, you acquire or meet two more party members, Pyra, who is primarily a mage, and Milo, who is primarily a healer, but also pretty good attacker, and Pyra can get pretty good as well with certain weapons, such as the whip, or the cursed whip. Can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but pretty good, albeit cursed, of course. But the general plot of the game takes place in the Kingdom of Thornwood, and obviously, you know, you get the king, the royal family, all that kind of stuff. The king's daughter vanished into the labyrinth, and the game itself, as you could expect as a dungeon crawler, revolves around traversing the labyrinth. Now, the one thing that I want to say here is the main villain of the game is named Dark Soul, and I touched on it in my Let's Play. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember if I did in my review, maybe briefly, but that review is so old that I don't remember off the top of my head. It is not the same Dark Soul from Shining Force, which is very confusing because they look basically exactly the same. Now, if somebody knows differently, let me know. But I remember this from back when I first played it, and I looked up a couple things, and apparently it's not the same Dark Soul. Oh. So, yeah, I'm learning stuff on the fly here. Wait, what? Okay, so let me read this bit to you here. I had a couple, like, notes up on the screen, which obviously I didn't review, apparently. In Shining Force Gaiden Final Conflict, which is Shining Force Gaiden 3, never released in America, but you could play it by way of translation patch on an emulator. And I actually have a port that is patched for the Sega Master System instead of the Game Gear, which is pretty cool. But it was... I don't even know if I want to read this. I guess I will, because it's kind of spoiling it for me. But I saw it already, so I'm not going to forget it. It is revealed that Dark Soul is the son of Dark Soul and Michaela, the villains of Shining Force 1. So apparently this Dark Soul is the son? That's super weird. I don't know if that's accurate or not. But anyway, the Dark Soul in this game is not the same one from Shining Force 1, so I'll leave it at that, I guess. The other stuff might be up for conversation. I haven't played that game yet, Shining Force Gaiden Final Conflict. It's one of the only ones that I haven't played. So I guess I'll wait and see what happens in that myself. But, anyways. So the king's daughter vanished into the labyrinth, Dark Soul doing his thing, and you take control of Hiro, or whatever you name him. And his father, Mordred, also vanished. And I can't remember, but I believe he was to have vanished in the labyrinth as well. So basically, you're kind of on a fetch quest, in a sense, to find the princess's daughter, as well as your father. You kind of have like a two-pronged journey goal in mind as Hiro. And first, you find Princess Jessa, which is the princess of the King of Thornwood. And then eventually you do encounter Mordred as well. I don't want to go too deep into the plot of it all. Again, if you guys want to watch it, check out my playthrough, check out my review, blah, blah, blah. All the good stuff is in there. But for now, after getting that out of the way, let's take a look at the actual game. I also wanted to point out real quick, I forgot to do this at the beginning. My Final Fantasy podcast, everything was done through OBS, 100%. I had horrible video editing stuff. I was literally using Windows Movie Maker for years. I'm not kidding. I switched over to DaVinci Resolve maybe about 5 or 6 months ago, which I love. It takes care of all my needs. So I'm going to be doing a lot of editing post-recording through OBS, which is what this is still being recorded in. But I have a section over to the screen's right where I'll be putting a lot of stuff. However, I will be showing things occasionally on camera as well. Segueing into taking a look at the actual game. Again, I'm not going to be doing an unboxing for this. There's really not much to it. It's the box, the game, and the manual. Excuse me. I'm sure that the original game may have come with like some inserts and stuff like that. I'll hold it a little bit closer. I don't have the best, it's just a webcam, you know what I mean? Logitech 1080p kind of thing. I don't know about all the detail. I'll definitely get like a close-up of the back of the box and stuff like that for you guys to see a little bit better. I guess we'll read that first, why not, shall we? Shining in the darkness. Banish the fiendish forces of Dark Soul and restore peace to the enchanted kingdom of Thornwood. Search for the powerful arms of light and fight the savage creatures that roam the darkness of the labyrinth. Use your warrior's skills and cunning to pass the test of the ancients and become a shining knight. Features a 3D first-person perspective that puts you in the adventure, incredible panoramic cinematic views, fast-paced scrolling whisks you from battle to battle for non-stop action, which we'll touch on later. 8 mega game with battery backup. And there's a couple of screenshots with subtitles of A Warm Welcome, which is featuring the Blackbone enemy. Looks like, yeah, getting attacked by Flame, or excuse me, Blaze 3 or Blaze 4, I think Blaze 4. Looks like I have a hair stuck in there. Stopping off at the tavern for the latest gossip. And then lastly, it looks like we're casting Bolt 4, yep. Battle hordes of monsters in the 9-level labyrinth. Reading this was actually a good thing, because a couple more things I wanted to touch on about the general game before we get into the instruction manual, which I'm not going to go through fully. I'm just going to kind of briefly cover it, and there's one section that I found to be pretty interesting. So yeah, one of the parts, aside from finding Princess Jessa and your father, Mordred, is eventually you need to find the powerful arms of light. I feel like that's not really mentioned super early in the game, but that's something that is required to complete the game, and it becomes more of a focal point later on. And then I also wanted to touch on besides the labyrinth itself, is kind of the hub of Shining in the Darkness, which is you have the ability to choose between 3 different places to go. One is the labyrinth, one is the castle, and the other is the town. The town is very much similar in ways to the Shining Force Gaiden / Shining Force CD games, where you have the ability to buy items, weapons, armor, and in this particular game there's also a church, there's also the tavern or the inn, I can't remember what they refer to it as, I think it's a tavern. That's where you're able to kind of rest up for the night, and there's NPCs throughout that change, and dialogue changes as you progress, which is pretty cool, giving you a little bit more in-depth story and engrossment, if you will. The castle pretty much serves as a starting point, and then you'll check in periodically throughout. You will be given certain things. In some instances, somebody might take stuff away from you if you're not careful, and Dark Soul appears there quite often as well to kind of advance the story, if you will, as well as the tavern. And then there's actually a place, I think it might be referred to as a trader. When you progress further into the game, there is a tent-like area throughout the town that you don't have access to initially. But eventually it basically becomes the ultimate weapon person, armor person, because you can give mithril ores and dark blocks to them to make very powerful weapons and armor, sometimes cursed in the case of if you're making it with a dark block. And in the church, obviously, you revive, cure, curses, save your game, and so forth. The majority of the game, though, you're obviously going to be spending in the labyrinth. I'd say the majority is probably 65% labyrinth, maybe 25% town, maybe 30, honestly. Yeah, probably more like 30, and then probably like 5% in the castle. That's 100% right. I'm horrible at math. But that's the gist of the game, pretty much. And then we'll take a look at the manual. I'll bring out the cartridge, too, just for you guys to see. So, I haven't had to replace the battery backup on this, luckily. it's still kicking through 2 playthroughs of mine, and even some of the playthroughs that were on this when I first bought it. I think I got this game off of eBay, probably in like 2000. I don't know. I want to say maybe like this one might have been like 2010 or something like that, because like I said, I'm a big Shining Force fan, so I probably grabbed this a little bit earlier in my retro renaissance. I started collecting retro games pretty hard in the college era, so that would be about 2000, probably 2007 was when I really started collecting again, with a few ebbs and flows here and there, you know, me kind of dipping out for a little while, but ultimately I kind of stayed in it. You know, I've loved them since I was a kid. I didn't really get rid of a lot of my stuff, so a lot of the stuff that I still have, I mean, the majority of it, I'm sure, is from flea markets and eBay and this, that, and the other, but I still have a lot of the stuff from when I was a kid, so. But taking a look at the manual, this is what I was touching on earlier. Unfortunately, my manual is missing. It starts on page 5. From what I understand, I'm pretty much missing the front cover, the back cover. Missing mostly bullshit, but I would like a good copy of the manual at some point. Unfortunately for me, I haven't found one that's a reasonable price, of course. Seems like I'm gonna probably have to buy a complete copy on eBay and then sell this one and try to recoup the funds, but I'm not looking to spend more than 15 bucks on an upgraded manual, because I mean, I kind of have it. It's just because it's part of the Shining series, I want it to be in good shape, because I am a collector and I do love this series so much. But realistically, the manual is pretty simple. Goes over the ins and outs of the game, you know, like different commands you could pick, status afflictions, equipping stuff, blah 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 blah. Kind of goes over the village, which I mentioned, so it is a tavern, not an inn. The shrine is the priest holy area, which is also very prevalent in the Shining Force series too. The different shops that you can go into, and then we have not all of the stuff, but it kind of goes over the weapons and the armor, as well as some items from the alchemist. The item shop is the alchemist shop. I don't think it really goes over the special place that opens up with the mithril ores and whatnot. And then in the back, it's kind of going over how you deal with fighting, magic, different spells, whether it be attacking or healing, and auxiliary. And the main reason why I wanted to even look through this in the first place for you guys was the very last page for me before the memo, which again, it's not the entire manual. I'm missing a couple pages. I think there might have been another memo page and then like a back cover or something. Mentions the quest itself, which is pretty good. These are good tips for a first-time player. The son of Mordred may not leave the castle until given permission by King Drake. To continue your search for your father Mordred and Princess Jessa, you must first pass the trials of the ancients: strength, courage, wisdom, and truth. These make you a worthy knight. So before you could advance further into the labyrinth, you always have access to the first floor of the labyrinth. You have to go through the trials of the ancients, which were mentioned. Strength, courage, wisdom, and truth, they're in the form of caves. So in essence, there's like 9 floors. There's 5 floors of the labyrinth and the 4 caves of the trials. But you have to go through those before you could even get to floor 2. You must find a special item and take it to the king before your friends can join you. So at the beginning, you solo as hero, and then when you find a certain item, which I don't want to get into, I want to spoil it, you take it back to the king, and then when you go back to town, that's when Ira and Milo eventually join you. The fates of Princess Jessa, your father, and possibly the entire kingdom of Thornwood rest on your shoulders. Go forth, son of Mordred, conquer the darkness, and return as a shining knight. May the strength and courage of the ancients be with you. So, you know, the Shining, the ancients, the this, the that, you can kind of see where the Shining Force series obviously borrowed a lot from this. Beyond, you know, the general aesthetics and stuff like that. But I wanted to take a quick look at that game with you guys, so put that to the side. I'm actually going to put it on the floor. Alright, now we're going to move on to the general reception of Shining in the Darkness. You know, not just me. You know, I reviewed the game. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10. I'll be honest with you guys, after playing through it a second time, I'd probably bump it down to 7.75 out of 10, which is obviously still a good score. But to me, it's not one of the elites. And, I mean, I'll get into that a little bit more later, but the general reception from publications, the interwebs over the course of time, you know, back in the day, now, back in the day, a lot of Sega publications absolutely loved it. Obviously, with the console wars, you got to take things with a grain of salt. Like, if it wasn't a completely neutral, you know, like GamePro or something like that, like Nintendo Power is going to be jerking themselves off. The Sega magazines are going to be jerking themselves off as well. I'll probably pop some review scores up in general from over the years. But it seems like a lot of the Sega-leaning things gave this game somewhere between 8, 9 out of 10. Where I feel like a lot of the more middle ground review places were kind of, you know, a little bit more in my range, like maybe 6 to 8, kind of like leaning around 70%, however you want to look at it for the review scores. And I feel like in recent days, that's kind of about where it's settled as well, and that's kind of what I agree on. I don't think, you know, no offense to those of you that love this game, I get it. Trust me, I do get it. But for somebody that's like a huge Shining Force guy, and I'm not a big dungeon crawler guy either, this got me into the genre and I do enjoy it, but it's still not my go-to for RPGs. I still prefer strategy RPGs and traditional turn-based RPGs over this, but I think the majority of the reviews that I've been seeing, especially nowadays, seem to rate this game pretty much where I would put it. One thing that's very interesting to note though, and I did not realize this until I started recording, I wrote some notes down. Apparently this game was pretty big in Europe. I have like no knowledge on the PAL shtick, so any European fans out there, PAL region, my apologies. I know, obviously, you know, I'm from America, NTSCU, whatever. I know mostly that stuff. I know a little bit of NTSCJ because I did some importing. When I got my Retron 5, I bought like a crap ton of, like, you know, Japanese Mega Drive, Super Famicom, stuff like that. So I don't really know much about the history of gaming in Europe, but apparently this was deemed a pioneer of Japanese console RPGs. And this I didn't know at all. This game, one of the reasons why it was deemed a pioneer is because of the timing in which it was released. And, you know, it is a good game, so I could see it. But apparently the first Final Fantasy game, you guys can quote me if I'm wrong here, please feel free to do so. The first official Final Fantasy game that was released in Europe might have been like 7? It could have been maybe 6, but I think it was 7. Because this game came out in, let's see, what was it again? Was it 91? Yeah, it was 91. And I read that Final Fantasy, the first Final Fantasy game in Europe, wasn't released until years later, which would probably put it at what, 95, 96, 97, something like that? So it might have been Final Fantasy 7, but either way, it's one of the later Final Fantasy games, so it seems like they were probably starved for JRPGs over there, and this seems to be one of the first that they got. And I mean, shit, look at it. It's a great looking game, you know what I mean? For 1991, the Shining aesthetic is on point. I love the way this game looks. So I felt that was pretty interesting as far as the reception goes, you know, because a lot of us, you know, admittedly, as Americans, we live inside of our own bubble, and a lot of times we don't really think beyond that, you know, obviously with more important things, but when speaking about video games, you know, it's like, oh, well, this game came out now, you know, but, well, if you think about it, Japan got it half a year before us, PAL got it a year later, you know, so different areas have different thoughts and receptions of the games, whether it be because they were released earlier, released later, whatever the case may be. But yeah, now I wanted to kind of veer off again and do a little bit of excerpt reading from this amazing fucking book, by the way. Although I'm a little salty, I did a review on one of their books on my channel, and they commented and all that kind of stuff. I made a story when I got this on Instagram, and they didn't like reshare it. I don't know why. They reshared everybody else's. This is the what's the official name here? The Guide to Japanese Role-Playing Games. Look how thick this boy is. If you like RPGs, first of all, Bitmap Books is fucking amazing. Almost everything that they come out with is great. I don't have all the stuff because I'm not made of money, but I have a lot of the books. The visual compendiums, awesome. The Game Boy cover art thing, great. This is the best book they've ever come out with, but I am biased because I love RPGs. If you like RPGs, get this book. They also have a computer RPG book that I need to get, but I wasn't much of a computer gamer growing up beyond a couple years with DOS, and then my grandparents and parents got me a Sega Genesis for this house, which is my grandma's house, which I own now, back at my parents' house, and then they eventually got me an SNES as well, but I digress. This book is fucking awesome. I wanted to read the excerpt about Shining in the Darkness. Pretty much any JRPG you could think of is pretty much covered in this book. Like, we're talking, like, the Dragon Slayer series, stuff that never came close to making its way to America, you know, up into, it covers certain series throughout the book, like Shin Megami Tensei, Final Fantasy, obviously. There's a section on all Shining games, even more modern stuff like Dark Souls. It's all in here. Great fucking book, dude. It's gonna give me so much inspiration for future playthroughs and stuff. And it is huge. It's like, what is it? Fucking, it's like almost 700 pages. I'm having trouble flipping here. I'll kind of hold it up so you guys can read it. And I'll give them their due as well. There's the Shining in the Darkness section. Maybe I'll take a picture of it and edit it in for you guys. What shall we read? Whew, lots of talking. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Shining in the Darkness, developed by Sega, released in 1991, platforms Gen. I'll read the little caption on the right first. Sega was keener to cater to Western RPG audiences in the early 16-bit days, which is why the titles like Shining in the Darkness got localized. Princess Jessa of the Kingdom of Thornwood has been kidnapped by the evil wizard Dark Soul and is held in the depths of the labyrinth. It's up to the hero not only to rescue her, but also find out what happened to his missing father. As an early RPG for the Genesis, Shining in the Darkness is meant to be accessible to new players. Compared to classic dungeon crawlers like Wizardry, it cuts back on the character customization, which is very true. There are only 3 playable characters, all pre-made: the hero, the elf magician Pyra, and the cleric Milo. And if defeated, you're sent back to town, maintaining your experience and items, but with your gold halved, which is funny, because I play so many RPGs, and if it's not one of my favorites, I always forget what the shtick is. And I could have sworn that it was one of the you lose your progress games, but it's not. You just lose half your gold, which isn't that bad. I freaked out during my playthrough a couple of times. And it says a la Dragon Quest, which I also forgot when I replayed Dragon Quest about 2 years ago. Dragon Warrior, excuse me. But just because it's accessible doesn't mean it's easy. As it still requires careful mapping and plenty of grinding to make your way through its 9 floors. This was the first title by Sega CD4, later renamed Sonic Software Planning, before it spun off as Camelot. It has a very friendly fantasy storybook feel to it, which I completely agree with, and eschews boring menus in favor of visually impressive scenes. Absolutely. These include a town explored via a panorama image, where you can choose to visit the inn, to rest, and talk to various folk, check out the alchemy and armor shops to purchase things, or visit the shrine to check your experience to save your game. Forgot to mention that when you do go to the shrine with the priest, he tells you how close you are to leveling up. Many of its unique touches, like the visual style and especially the interface, on which you pick from nodding yes or no heads, can be seen in later games, including the Shining Force strategy RPGs and the Golden Sun games, which I really want to get to soon. For experienced players, however, it may be a little too simple to play, and I guess that's probably a good little veer-off. So, yes, in a way it's simple to play. I will agree with that. You know, there's no character customization beyond what are you equipping to them. But it's not an easy game. So, in a sense, yeah, you have less to quote-unquote manage, but holy hell, it's not easy. It is not easy, which is perfect because in my notes, we're going to get into that now. So I want to give my thoughts on the game. I've been kind of touching in here and out, but I want to give my full thoughts. It'll be kind of quick, actually. So, when I think about Shining in the Darkness, what do I think of? And we're going to be going from bad to good, back and forth. Grind is what comes to mind. At times very annoying. And the reason why it's very annoying is, unlike games like Lufia, where I feel like the grinding is totally necessary because you need to know a certain spell to beat a boss or something like that, I find that grinding to be kind of annoying. It's like, fuck, like, well, I guess I have to be level 34 because I need to know this spell, so I'm just going to sit here and do this, you know, press buttons and shit until on that level. I feel like the annoyance of grinding in this game, because I don't mind the grinding itself, and I don't mind grinding in general. The encounter rates are fucking brutal in this game, dude. Like, I don't know the ins and outs and the coding of all this stuff, but in my second playthrough, in particular the one that's on YouTube, holy hell, the encounter rates were brutal. Brutal. I actually don't even really care for the beginning of the game. I feel like the game doesn't really start picking up until you actually reach like level 2 of the labyrinth. When you're doing the trials through the caves, oh my god, it's like, it borders on just being annoying, I'll be honest with you. You'll just get encounter after encounter after encounter. Like, just, you take like 2 steps, encounter. 1 step, encounter. You make a wrong turn, encounter. And the worst part about these encounters, the further that you go, obviously the enemies get stronger. You'll be running into like, there'll be a certain enemy type or two in the section that you're in that you're like, oh my god, please, I don't want to run into them. And then the game will literally throw 6 of them at you. And I found, not until later in the game, that running wasn't that viable. Because if you're running into a group of these 6 people and you're not over leveled, in my opinion, and in my experience, running isn't worth it, because I would just get caught, and the next thing you know, I'm getting hit by 6 or 7 enemies, and then most of the time these annoying enemies, no spells, or, oh my god, insta-kills. I couldn't even tell you how many times I got desouled in this game. Like, in comparison to the Shining Force games, where I feel like desouled never works, like when an enemy does it on me, maybe once out of every 10 tries, I feel like in Shining in the Darkness, if an enemy casts desoul, it's like 50-50. And of course, the desoul or whatever will always hit the main character. You know what I mean? Why not, right? Gotta really throw a monkey wrench in. And the worst part is you'll be inching closer and closer to the end of the trial or the floor, and then bam, you're wiped out. You know, you get 4 encounters in a row, you ran out of your MP, and then one of them casts desoul and you're dead. Then you gotta retreat. Or you literally have to just die to warp back to town at that point if you don't have like an angel wing to aggress, or enough MP to aggress. Now, I do want to point out that you do learn a spell, I believe it's called Peace, which is basically, when thinking about Pokemon, it's like a repel, but it'll only keep away the monsters that are weaker, so hypothetically lower level or right around the same level as you, but if you are overstepping your ground, so to speak, Peace does not work. You'll just waste your MP and the game will be like, oh, sorry, it didn't work, and then you just gotta continue on. So, you know, there's lots of retreating, which I touched on, but that's the nature of the genre. I am still kind of a dungeon crawler noob. The only 2 dungeon crawler games that I've beaten, Shining in the Darkness twice over the last 5-6 years, and Phantasy Star 1. So, get used to the grind, lots of encounters, annoying encounters, and retreating. But enough bad. The good, the aesthetics are amazing. It's Shining aesthetic 101. It is alluring, it is clean, it is crisp, it is cute, wonderful. The music, also great, as it is throughout the series. The one thing that I will say, the music is a bit limited in this one. The soundtrack is clearly a lot smaller than Shining Force or Shining Force 2, and that does kind of hamper it a little bit, but the music that is there, very memorable. The UI, you know, I could even admit it, the UI of Shining Force and Shining Force 2 could be a little bit clunky as well. That general clunkiness is here, probably a little bit more so, especially because this game came out first. I feel like they did try to refine a few things as they went along. So, you know, I mean, what do you expect? And though you're playing a Japanese role-playing game from 1991, you gotta expect a little bit of clunkiness, right? So, you gotta go into it with that in your brain and just accept it and move on. But beyond that, 2 of the other things that really stick out to me, the sprite work is amazing. Some of the enemies are a little but they're very colorful, very vibrant. A few of them legitimately look really cool. Some of the spells and stuff look great. It screams Shining. And that's the one thing about the Shining series that I love. Again, not talking way later, like PS2 era and beyond, but the Shining series from, you know, Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, Game Gear, through Sega Saturn. It has that look, like, you know it's a Shining game. And then conversely, you know, the Climax Entertainment, Sonic Software Planning, all that kind of stuff, Camelot, you see that in other games like Golden Sun, Landstalker. They all kind of like blend together, and it's great. It's one of my favorite aesthetics in gaming for sure. It's carried throughout a bunch of games, obviously. One of the good things, though, as hard as this game is, as annoying as it can be, the gameplay is rewarding. You know what I mean? Like, whew, I just got through that trial of courage or wisdom or whatever the case may be, or, oh my god, floor 3 was a nightmare. Oh, I reached the end, perfect. There is a sense of great reward and relief, but in a good way, not like, oh, thank god I get to shut the game off, although I will say at times that's kind of how it can be. But you do feel very rewarded when you beat this game, so the journey is certainly worth it. At least one playthrough. If you're a fan of the Shining series and you haven't played this game, or you're a fan of dungeon crawlers, or just RPGs in general, play it once. There's many different platforms that this is on. You don't need the Sega Genesis version. Look it up. It's on like Steam, it's on like various collections. I think it's probably on the Switch, on the Sega Genesis collection that it came out with. A lot of different ways to play it, so. So, kind of wrapping up now. I would say that ultimately Shining in the Darkness, seen by many, not just myself, as the groundwork and springboard onto bigger and better things. I think objectively you have to admit, even if you're a huge fan of this, you have to admit that the Shining Force series is better. And obviously Shining Force owes everything to Shining in the Darkness, because without it, it wouldn't be here, like I said. So the lasting legacy of Shining in the Darkness, in my opinion, is it laid the groundwork. I think that they probably... I'm just speaking off of my thoughts here, I don't know if this is the case. I feel like the switch from dungeon crawler to strategy RPG was probably made for more accessibility. Even though this is one of the, it's not super complex of a game by any means. In some ways, the strategy RPG can be seen as more complex, but I feel like that this particular genre with the Shining IP had more room for growth switching to what they did with Shining Force as opposed to this. Now, a straight up sequel of this on the Mega Drive, I mean, I would have played it and probably would have enjoyed it as well, but I think that most people can come to the conclusion and admit that Shining Force to Shining Force 2 and Shining Force 3, which I'm not super fond of yet. I've only played Scenario 1. I was waiting for a modded Saturn so I could play the Translation Project. I played Scenario 1 only, I still gotta get to 2 and 3, but anyway. Shining Force to Shining Force 2, such a huge technical leap, and I feel like as much, even though I do love Shining Force 1 more, a little bit more than Shining Force 2, I feel like you can see the growth there, and the same could be said from Shining in the Darkness to Shining Force. So realistically, the lasting legacy, again guys, is it's a springboard into the Shining series. This is the one that started it all. Without this, we would have none of those games, and the gaming world would be a worse off place for sure. And whether or not I think this is, the pinnacle of the series, or one of the best games I've ever played, or even one of the best dungeon crawlers, that's besides the point. This game is worthy of a playthrough. It has a lot going for it, even though it does have some negatives. And I feel like that, again, if you are a RPG fan, Shining fan, give it a try or replay it, and you won't be upset. I guess to kind of spare us all from me rambling on into this point, I'm kind of at the end of my notes here, and I feel like I'm already repeating myself a couple times, so I'm going to wrap things up. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate that. I do my best to reply to all comments and all videos. And yes, while this is still kind of a podcast, Bitscast, whatever you want to call it, it's actually not available on podcast websites. It's only available on my YouTube, so I do apologize about that. But I signed up on some podcast sites. Most of them are, paid to keep things up after 90 days or whatever. I'm not paying for shit. I don't make money off of this, so I'm not wasting my money. You know what I mean? But, like I said, guys, expect more things like this in the future from me, whether it's, breaking down games, deep dive into games, more broad topics, whatever the case may be. I already have a third podcast in mind, and I hope to probably have it out maybe in July, maybe late June, if things are really tickling my fancy and my creative wheels get going, but we'll see. And guys, if anybody out there wants to collab with me, feel free. Join my Discord, www.bitsdiscord.com. We can get to talking, DMing, all that kind of stuff. But anyways, guys, thank you so much, especially if you're still watching, you stuck around for the whole thing. I do appreciate it. If you liked this, I'd highly recommend going back to watch my Final Fantasy podcast as well, because you probably like RPGs, right? And I feel like even though the production quality is a little step down from this one, that is a very worthwhile podcast. In my opinion, I felt like I did a pretty good job of breaking down the whole game. Yeah, I'm not an expert on Final Fantasy, but I feel like I offered a little bit, to newcomers or even some people that have played the game a little bit here and there to kind of take with them on into the future. And hopefully the same goes for this one. If I can convince one person to play this game, I did my job, right? All right, guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next podcast.